All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Tapped In Conversations. Today, I have a very special guest, my new friend from Threads, Annie. How do I pronounce your last name, Annie? Bertrand?
Yeah. Yeah, Bertrand.
I'm super excited to share Annie's work on this podcast so you can meet her and understand a little bit more about what she does and her gifts and offerings. But also, we're going to talk about this very interesting thing that we learned about each other. I don't even know how it came about exactly, but that Annie and I both lost hearing in our right ear while we were pregnant with our firstborn children. So we're going to talk about the astrology connections there and yeah, whatever else comes up. So Annie, if you'd like to introduce yourself, welcome to Tapped In.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. Hello, or hello to all your listeners. So, my name is Annie. I'm an ancestral astrologer and energy healer. I'm also a cycle breaking mom of two very spirited kids. And I basically blend karmic astrology with ancestral healing to help moms and healers decode their soul contracts, reparent their lineage, and raise families that are rooted in freedom and who they truly are, not fear and trying to fit into this societal box.
Love it. I resonate with that. I'm on the same frequency. Super cool. Yeah, your offerings are so unique. I don't know anybody else who's like specifically offering ancestral astrology, in the way that you're doing as a cycle breaker, as a mother. Um, what's that look like for you in terms of the work that you do with clients? How did you come into it? Like a little bit about your story, that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. So basically, it all started with my Saturn return. My daughter, my second, she had just been born like right before it. And it really catalyzed all of my spiritual awakening. I was working in pharmaceutical marketing at the time, and I realized that I was not aligned with that industry like whatsoever. And it was a really big like identity crisis because, I woke up to the industry, the corruption, but at the same time it paid my bills and I had, two young kids and I was like, this is all I know. Like it was just a lot. And so I turned to spirituality for answers. And that's actually how I found my energy healing teacher because I was very deep in postpartum depression, layered on with that's it, the Saturn return, layered on with like, what am I gonna do for work? It's just like all the things. And so my energy healing teacher, she literally changed my life in like one session. We did a lot of ancestral healing, and I realized that that's it, a lot of what I was experiencing wasn't even mine. It had been passed down my maternal lineage. And so when my daughter was born, that maternal line again, right? It was just like reactivated. So literally one session just like changed everything. And by this point, I had been in therapy weekly for like a year. And I was like, this one session. So I was like, oh my God, I need to learn this modality. Like I have to learn this modality. It's life changing. So I started training with her. I trained for 3 years to become like an advanced energy healing ancestral practitioner. And in my third year, that final year, I was doing some past life work and accessing my Akashic records and all. And I realized that I had been an astrologer in like many lives before. So I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense because I've always loved astrology. And then a couple of days later, I was like, duh, like everything came together. And I was like, oh, I could like combine the work that I'm already doing with astrology because astrology is really just like a map. Like I can look at someone's map, like their chart, and I'm like, let's talk about your mom wounds. I'm like, something going on here, right? And so I really just see, yeah, I see charts from a karmic lens because that's how I was trained first. So I just can't help it but like recognize those patterns and everything. And so yeah, that's kind of how I ended up doing the work that I'm doing now.
That's such a cool blend. I love that you can bring in the energy work as like it's almost like a little bit different than how I actually operate because for me the framework actually underneath it is astrology, but then I bring the therapeutic tools in on like the top. But I like that flip of like looking at everything as energy first, and so amazing that you came about this through your Saturn return because similarly, that's when I recognized, oh, astrology has is something I've done like for lifetimes. This is not like
Mm.
anything new. This is not a new interest. And it kind of clicked for me then where I was like, oh, this is actually what I came here to do. So I love that about Saturn. It really clarifies things.
It
Um,
does, yeah.
you have a Saturn moon conjunction, I have a square. So it makes sense that, during that time, there is something that's kind of unlocked or refined or clarified, around something relating to the soul, which is, the moon and that sort of thing. So, um, beautiful that you have like come to this place and yeah, and just like your kids are so lucky that they have this resource in you and And of course, your clients are probably super lucky too to have you point things out to them. And also, so in addition to providing your clients with information, like you're essentially helping them remove energetic patterns and, like unravel things. So it's not just information dump, it's an actual, like, what would you say? What's the language you would use?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of kind of my biggest pet peeves I find with astrology or even like tarot and when you go psychics and things. And I feel like this is something that I'm starting to see. I'm wondering if you're seeing that in your clients as well. But with just all the big energy shifts that we're going to be seeing, I think people will definitely be moving away from that. Like when Neptune was in Pisces, it was just what I've been calling like the sparkly spirituality, right? Of like, I want to know like my galactic lineage and I'm a star seed and like this is, why I am the way I am. And it's so great. But I think that's kind of phasing out. And that's what I find. It's just like you can have these readings and it's like, so what? Like, cool, this is why this is the way that it is. And like, yeah, this happened in my childhood, but like, so what? And that's kind of how I had started feeling with therapy. For me, I've struggled. I mean, I'm sure with that Saturn moon, I've struggled with in my first house, I've struggled with mental health for a very long time. So I've been in therapy since like my 20s. And in the beginning, it was amazing because it just brought me so much self-awareness and understanding of these patterns. But that's it. After like 15 years, it was like, okay, like there's some mom stuff again. See you next time, like same week, same time next week. And so for me, it's like that information and that self-awareness overwhelm. It was just like, it was kind of actually hurting me more at that point. So I'm just really passionate about that's actually making a change. And that's where bringing in the energy healing and ancestral healing really makes a big difference because you can actually, like, when I pinpoint something in someone's chart and they're like, yeah, and they have a big emotional reaction or whatever, and they're like, my mom or whatever it was, then I'm like, okay, let's actually like pull that out of your body. Like the reason why you start crying the minute I say like this thing is because those emotions literally are living in your fascia and your organs, right? So it's like pull them out and let's like rewire the neural pathways. They do a lot of neuro linguistic programming. So it's like, let's rewire those neural pathways so that's it. It doesn't feel like trigger, trigger, trigger all the time? So yeah.
Yeah, I totally relate. I think that Neptune in Pisces was beautiful for giving us a lot of meaning and insight, but it's like now that it's moving into Aries, it's like, well, then what can I do with it? Like, what action am I going to take to integrate it so that, I can actually facilitate change in my life? So I think it's actually helpful that we have Saturn there with Neptune to kind of
Mhm.
bring in that disciplined, more
Mhm.
structured response to, okay, this is cool that I know this about myself. I'm inspired to take action. And now I'm actually going to do it. And you're 0 degree Aries sun. So this is huge for you. You're like at the brink of such a huge transformation, a brand new beginning. I mean, we all are, right? But like as a 0 degree Aries sun, you're kind of almost spearheading some type of shift. Does it feel like that for you?
It does, yeah. So I feel like I got a bit of a preview of it like last year, when Saturn Neptune went into Aries. And that's actually when I had like this big download to really own ancestral astrology because before I was referring to as parenting astrology and I was leaning more into like, this is like your child's Mercury. So like you want to communicate to them like this way and this is their moon and all that, which is still like a lot of what I do because like I said, it has to be practical. But I realized I was like, no, no, my magic is really like ancestral patterns and recognizing that. So yeah, that was like the big shift. Um, and then I just kind of went all in on myself. So last year I like 3x'd my business because I was like, I'm owning this, like I'm showing up. And then the planets went back into Pisces. And I feel like that was like, okay, girl, like here's all your shit that is not in alignment. That's gotta be like addressed if you really want to like fully claim that. So it was like little tease, get me all into it. And then I was like, oh, okay, I gotta deal with some things. But yeah, but it's so interesting that you mentioned that. Like, yeah, everybody's going through, big shifts for sure. But when I see planets like this in charts, like those are the karmic moments. That's what I say to people. Like I have one client, for example, that is her midheaven is in Aries. And so I was telling her, I was like, like your soul like chose that. Like for you to have any places that are at Aries that are going to be activated by this whole like Aries era, like that's a karmic choice. Like your soul made that because they knew that this was going to happen. So yeah, I love seeing those things they feel very fated. And like that's what I mean when I say like karmic is that it was like a bigger soul plan, basically.
Totally. Yeah, it feels very like it's very much in the design. Like whenever I'm
Yeah.
watching working with a client over time too, I can really see how there's an intelligent design behind everything that's, orchestrated in this experience. It's like, what the hell is this, first of all? But then, like, also, wow, what the hell is this? Like, when you start to really peel back all of those layers. And I think right now, I don't know if this has been your experience, but with the North Node in Pisces, and then the ruling planet of that North Node, which is Jupiter, in Cancer, there's been a real like opening or awareness or connection into ancestral patterns. And specifically with the maternal line, I've noticed like moms
Mhm.
really coming to the surface. Have you noticed that in your client work?
Yeah. I mean, I feel so Jupiter is my chart ruler. And so with it being in Cancer, so a lot of the work that I do, I feel like I've always kind of attracted, those moms for sure. But yeah, I do feel like it's kind of a conversation that's coming more like mainstream compared to the time when I first started talking about this like 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I mean, you're having your Jupiter return. In the whole
Mhm.
sign system, you have Jupiter in the eighth house, which is about like what we inherited and in our
Mhm.
psyche and all that. And then you're also Pluto and Scorpio generation in the 12th house, like major power there to transform ancestral patterns, especially in that womb space. Like you come in
Mhm.
with like this womb awareness, womb knowledge, past life connection where you can really like bridge worlds, and I think that's such a cool thing. My husband has that too, and he does a lot of energy work as well,
Oh.
clearing out um, patterns in people's physiology. So he's North Node in Taurus, and he's a chiropractor.
Oh.
He's a
Oh,
chiropractor,
that tracks.
medical intuitive, and healer. So he does a similar thing to what you do in actually removing these like attachments and overlays of
Mhm.
what we're carrying that isn't even ours. And I think that that's
Mhm.
actually such a key part of this like collective moment is recognizing what we're carrying that isn't even ours to carry anymore. With these two planets in the final degrees of Pisces, it's like, whoa, like this is heavy. This is dense. This is like I'm swimming in it. And I'm really looking forward to, for all of our sake, the drying out of this collective soup that we've been swimming in for a while. And
Mhm.
really seeing, what happens when we start aligning with our authentic, like soul spirit, path. So I think it's going to be a really interesting year ahead. Do you have any ideas or like, visions for what is coming in this next year, 2026? Or we're in it, so it's not like the next year, it's this year.
Yeah. Um, I mean, honestly, I feel like the global stage has been so loud that I haven't really tapped into anything other than just that like civil unrest and just like chaos and all of that, you know? So yeah, that feels really present.
Yeah, it's definitely, I keep telling my clients the same thing. I'm like, it's definitely going to get louder. And in that sense, the pull towards distraction, like pulling us out of our own internal knowing is going to be very tempting, but also like, you know, maintain some sense of like real clarity as to what is ours. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm very Aquarian in my way of kind of looking at life in general. So my sense is we have to build like parallel structures, like not fight the existing structure, but build parallel
Mhm.
structures and just let them fall so that we can, start building this new future.
Yeah, I totally agree. It kind of reminds me a lot of, I feel like COVID kind of prepared me for this. So when COVID happened, I moved from Canada to the Dominican Republic because I was like, I F this. Like, I cannot handle just like everything that was going on where I lived. And it was very strict. And so it was very much of like almost like, yeah, like a parallel world. And I felt a bit guilty at the time because like my family was on lockdown and they had masks and curfews and all the things. And I was like living very freely and my kids were going to school and there were no masks other than if you had to go to the bank where we lived. And so I very much felt like I was living in like a completely different world. But, and I felt bad for like showing up online and sharing and like being happy and thriving. I was like, this is awful. Like people are struggling, people are dying. But then like constantly my followers and friends would be like, no, like it's really helping me and it's like helping me to see, to keep going. And so I feel like this is similar to kind of what's gonna happen now. And it's like we're going to have to create our own little bubbles and not from like being ignorant and not, participating and doing our part. But I think that doing our part is really like continuing to, be light, especially if you're like an astrologer or a healer or any type of light in people's world. Like you have to focus on you and continue and create that little bubble to be the light for other people, right? And to be the example and to inspire them. And I think that that's going to make a bigger shift in the collective more so than like all of us, that's it, like being keyboard warriors and sharing this and sharing that and like thinking that we're making a difference. So it's a very interesting time.
Very interesting time. It's just going to get more interesting. I mean, astrology at least gives us some insight into that. Okay. Uh, so cool. Well, I am, just so grateful that you're here. And if you could remind me, because I don't remember, you were sharing something about the hearing piece on Threads, or like, how did this come up? Do you remember?
Yeah. I don't know if I was sharing a piece exactly about it. I just remember like, yeah, I shared something and then in the comments we were talking about it. I think I shared something about like maybe like a karmic activation or something on my kids, I don't know. And then you were like, "Oh, I actually like lost hearing when I was pregnant." And I was like, "Me too." Like, what do you mean? So yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So you lost your hearing in your right ear. Was it a sudden hearing loss or a gradual hearing loss when you were pregnant? How far along were you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was probably gradual because it wasn't like, oh my God, all of a sudden. Like I remember one day I was still working. So I don't know, I must have been like maybe like 6 or 7 months pregnant by this point. And so I was sitting at my desk and I was having a phone call. And I remember I had the phone on my ear and I couldn't hear really well. And I switched it to the other ear and I was like, whoa, like the volume was already so loud. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then yeah, I guess I ended up bringing it up to the doctor at my next appointment or whatever. And they're like, oh, I'm going to refer you to like a hearing specialist or whatever. You know that test there that you have you done it? And it's like the beeps and can you yeah, right. So she's like, I'm going to refer you to that because this is more common than you'd think. She told me like 20% of pregnancies. And I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, I was like, no. She was like, yeah. So basically, yeah, she told me that with hormonal changes, that it makes the bones that vibrate in your ear, which translates sound waves, right? For the vibrations, the hormones made them fuse together so they don't like vibrate properly, right? So I still hear, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 20%, but yeah, like it's just like if I like lay down on my good ear, I can't hear anything you're saying to me.
Oh, going to bed, buddy. Good night.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And you know what's hilarious is that I had they had offered me like surgery to correct it. Basically, they would take out that bone and replace it with like a prosthetic one, like one that they make. And so I was all set for the surgery and I was like, okay, great. And then I was like, this is really nice when my kids are young and that's it. They won't like be quiet or instead of going to bed or in the morning when they're like being loud. I'm like, I just turned on my good ear. So I actually canceled the surgery because I was like, this is kind of serving me.
I'm getting something from this, actually. I like this.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, I feel like it's kind of like meant to be in that way because my kids are loud. And my son is definitely like neurodivergent. He makes a lot of like stimming with noises and stuff. And I'm like, oh, and it's funny because it was his pregnancy that like made the hearing loss. I'm like, that feels karmic. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, it's really nice to just like not hear you at fucking loud volume.
It's
Yeah.
so easy to simultaneously like start to notice, like, when we lose a sense, a different sense can come online. Did anything like that
Mhm.
happen for you?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I can't think like the figurative senses, but I feel like psychically, totally. Yeah, you too.
Yeah, like I've always been intuitive and had a sense for thing and have like images will come into my mind, while I'm talking with clients and stuff. But I started to become more psychic and like it was so massive. It was like replacing that for this other sense where it was just like, oh my God, like I can feel other people's feelings, or like I had this really paranormal, like, crazy paranormal experience on a vacation once where I like essentially was guided through this girl's journey, like in this vacation home that we were renting. And
Mm,
like she was telling me every night that we were there, she was giving me insight into what had happened to her in the home and that she was stuck in this trauma loop and she needed help getting
mm.
out of, like, she couldn't fully, I don't know, move to the other side or like get
Yeah,
out
like crossover. Yeah.
until she, so my husband and I did this whole process to like help her move.
Wow.
So I feel in a way it's like a blessing, even though on some level, people would say it's a curse because it's a loss and it's
Hmm.
challenging for me. I have also tinnitus or tinnitus in that ear. So there is
Mm.
also this like white noise that's there that I can ignore most of the time, but it does get annoying sometimes.
Yeah.
And then what was weird for me is that I lost the hearing suddenly when I was pregnant, with my daughter, 8 weeks pregnant. It was just like I woke up and I literally like it was just like boom,
Mm.
and it just went out like turning off a TV screen or something, and just it's gone. And it was like what just happened, and I had just gotten over a cold. And in contrast to your experience, I went to several different ENTs and tons of doctors, and they're like, "We don't know what's wrong. We have no idea."
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, this affirms why I have all this mistrust with the, Western medical model, because they don't actually, I don't know, they don't know what they're doing, or like, that's a blanket statement. Obviously, there's some really wonderful people out there, but in my experience, they were basically just like, you're on your own. We have no idea what you could do, what's causing this. And sorry, you know. So that was really hard. And then a couple of years later, I wound up experiencing it in the left ear, which was so destabilizing because then I started to get vertigo and all this stuff. And thankfully, through homeopathic remedies and parasite cleanses and stuff, I was able to regain a lot of hearing in that ear, but I still have like a low grade tinnitus in that ear too. Um, but anyways, for me, you know, I kind of identified some transits that were going on at that time that made sense in terms of that loss. In your reflection of your own process, did you identify anything that was specific for this?
Um, yeah, so I didn't, I mean, I'm like, I didn't even look at my own transits. I was looking at your transits, but I was just looking from like a karmic point of view. Like for me, that's it. I know. So my son's Pluto is in Capricorn. So it's just like freaking smack on my like cluster of everything, you know? So I just like knew that it was very like activating and transformative. I was like, yeah, karmically, I was like, this makes sense. And he kind of like planted the seeds for everything that my daughter then catalyzed, like I was telling you, with my Saturn return. But it really all started with him, and then that mistrust of the medical system, same thing, was from him because he was vaccine injured, and everybody just like gaslit me, and they're like, it's febrile seizures, and then I was like, it's kind of weird. But I worked in the industry, so I was kind of like, okay, yeah, so my son was definitely that like activation, and that is when I feel like all my gifts kind of came on, and very much so like your husband, I'm a medical medium, and so my body like mirrors and proxies things, and that really came on like it always did. That's kind of what I would describe as being an empath, but that's when I started really realizing it and being like, oh, like someone, I would have a headache, and then a colleague would be like, oh, I've had this headache all day. And I was like, fuck, it's yours, like the worst. So yeah, very much of that karmic piece, which is also what I was looking at in your chart. So I'm curious if your takeaways and your transits, I'm wondering, I feel like Venus was like probably involved.
Probably. I mean, I wasn't specifically looking at any personal planets. I usually feel like with those life-changing events or life-altering events, it's usually outer.
Mhm.
And my chart ruler is Saturn. So I was having
Mhm.
Saturn was in, oh, I got to go back to the date. Saturn was in, I believe it was in opposition. It was conjunct my midheaven at the time. In
Mhm.
opposition to my
Yeah.
um IC. So with both of my children, actually, I had very specific Saturn transits to my moon, I believe. Yeah, I think my son,
Mhm.
my second born, my son Khalil, he Saturn was like quincunx my moon, and then with my daughter, it was opposite or something like that. So, um, let me look that up actually, as far as the dates, because
Basically, I was asking because Taurus rules like hearing, like the ear, right? Like the voice, hearing, all those things. And so I thought it was just really interesting that you have your Chiron is in Taurus, and then that's it, those moon activations. And I was like, this is probably feeling like some motherline stuff going on. And then so I use Placidus because I really like working with the rulership. And for me, my brain just like cannot when we like move the rulers of everything. I'm like, what's happening? So it is. And so then, yeah, so in the Placidus, your Venus is in fifth, which is like the house of children, and it's in Cancer. And then that maternal line. And I was like, oh, I'm seeing all the karmic dots.
yeah. So, this is an interesting piece about astrology that I think would be kind of interesting for my listeners, viewers, clients to understand is that there's many paths to the truth. Like, it doesn't matter what house system you're using or even Western versus Vedic, like, there is going to be a way in which you get to the truth. The pathways might just look differently. And I think that that's, such an interesting thing. And also speaks to why getting readings or having sessions with a lot of different people can be really valuable because you can get nuanced, detailed information and insight into your experience that you might not otherwise find, if you just stick with one person. So, yeah, I definitely feel like that I have Mercury almost at, like, if you round up, it's 29 degrees of Taurus, which is a
Mhm.
critical degree also. And so, yeah, the ruling planet of that, is Venus in Cancer, maternal line. And in Holstein's house, it's in my sixth house. So, um, it's fascinating too because I think, let's see, Jupiter had just started to square that Venus.
That's
So,
what I was asking. That's what I picked up on. That's it. To expand that, right? Like expand that the wounding, like the root stuff. Because to me, that's what I always look at. Like that's why I like using astrology is to get to the root cause of things, which I think is a big piece of what the medical grid is missing, right? So that's what I was clocking. I was like, oh, I was like, this is kind of expanding, but in a more challenging way. That maternal lineage, which is like, yeah, it relates back to Taurus, which like rules the ears, right?
yeah, 100%. I was in a first house year that year too. It was the 36th year for me. Which first house, is the self. It's also the body.
Hmm.
To health and medical astrology. And Saturn is the ruling planet of my first house. So I do feel like there was something there that was getting activated in my, like, maternal line. Well, here's an interesting piece of the story. She lost hearing, not when she was pregnant with me, but somewhere around that time. She lost hearing in her opposite ear, in her left ear. And she was diagnosed with Meniere's disease. And then go back even further, and her grandmother was basically almost deaf by the time she was like 85. So there is like this piece around, I don't know what it is. I mean, in my mom's sense, the left side of the body would be the feminine side,
Hmm.
the right side would be more the masculine side. How I've come to interpret it also was that, I don't know if you're familiar. I think you are familiar with German New Medicine. I mentioned this in our messaging.
Yeah.
Those of you out there, it is a concept of that when you experience shocks to your system, they call them conflict shocks, that there's some activity that happens in the brain. And then when that shock or that conflict is resolved, that's when you experience physical somatic symptoms. And
Mhm.
I wonder if there was something for me in becoming a mother that was resolving maybe something from the past that then, kind of there were the way that I've understood it is like there was something I didn't want to hear as a
Mhm.
child that then my body manifested it and kind of turned that off. And I'm like, still kind of, I believe in miracles. So I'm kind of like, I wonder if it could come back,
Yeah.
Have that curiosity about that.
I do, but then, like I said, there's a lot of auditory stimulation in my house, so the motivation's not really there, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
But I do, especially with I really like working with cell salts, and like frequency medicine. I have this like little device that I have. It's called a Healy. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But anyways, I just like I can see even like I know many people who've reversed like their eye loss, like vision, like improvements, right? So yeah, I do feel like it could be possible. But yeah, like I said, my motivation is not there.
yeah, I
It's
hear that.
serving me.
Get
Which like goes to show, right? I mean, I think that's such an interesting, just like side tangent with people with healing. It just really goes to show that like you have to want it, And like I always say, like sometimes when people are like, well, why would I want to like suffer? Like I have, pain all the time and da da. And it's like on a certain level, it's serving you in a way. Like I would say, everything serves and limits, And it's like that's it. It's serving you in a way. So it's like as much as it's like a hearing loss, I'm like, it is serving me in a way. So there's that.
I totally agree, and I share that same perspective that, and I find it's really interesting part of our human experience because I do find a lot of people are resistant to that concept of that we actually subconsciously do choose our suffering in some way. Um,
Mhm.
because it does serve us in some capacity. It's doing something for us. It's providing something. Every experience that we're having is providing something, some experience that we're designed to have or want to have as a soul. So fascinating that you can be in like a true conversation with that within yourself where you're like, actually, I'm okay with this.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to go back to what you were saying about, that activation. So for me, when I would look at your moon in Gemini, and if I would look at that Chiron and Taurus piece, and again, thinking of like family baggage and like karma, wounding, all that stuff, to me, I feel like that has to do around really like trusting yourself and your voice, and like speaking up, and feeling like that, like good enough, and like really trusting your like yeah yourself. I feel like that's a very much of like a Gemini shadow, right? It's just like all this information, and you think that it's going to help, and you're like, well, when I finally have all the information, but then it just flips over to overwhelm because over the underlying root is really that trusting yourself and feeling good enough, right? To like own what you say, and then with Chiron and Taurus, like speaking it in your voice. So all that to say, kind of relating it back to what we were saying with one sense goes down, like the others go up. And I feel like maybe that really activated like your mother's intuition and that self-trust, and kind of like these things went down and almost maybe compensated to, yeah, some of that wounding that was in you so that you can really trust yourself in like, and again, that motherhood activation, right? Because that fifth house.
My God, spot on. Definitely. Yeah, because I think, well, I also have my moon in opposite. I have a T square with Saturn, my moon, and Neptune. And so I think
Mm,
what I've come to realize since being a mother is now what, like I'm almost 9 years into it, is that I probably as a child had super high intuition, right? And then I could sense that things were happening or going to happen. And when they did, I was like, oh no.
mm,
Press that because
mm,
whatever that is, either I caused it or
mm,
like I made that happen. Like kids aren't aware of like how powerful they are, right? So I think I suppressed that somewhat and
mm.
it came online again through that activation. And what's interesting about the voice piece is that, and I don't know if this came up for you, but I think it comes up for a lot of moms of if you grew up in an environment where you weren't heard or your voice wasn't respected or honored or acknowledged, parenting can really stir that up because your kids, especially this Pluto and Capricorn generation, they're like, authority? What? Like, get out of here, and like, oh my God, no one's listening to me, right? And so
Totally.
it really did invite me into a conversation with myself of like, am I listening to myself also?
Mm,
Or similarly, even to the point where seeking external validation or seeking everybody to explain or identify for me what my experience was instead of just trusting. And I'm at such a different space with that now in terms of my own experience and mothering and all of that. So yeah, to your point, I think it was like a gift, a blessing in that way. Uh,
yeah, that's it. That's the thing, like that. yeah, it's from a society point of view, like, oh my God, you've lost something, and now it's like disability, right? It's like horrific, but just of like the serving, right? Everything does serve us. Like there is some good from that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, even in this conversation, I'm like having a different, like a shift of, leaning into gratitude a little bit of like what this has been, right? Like a loss is always in some sense a teaching, and some of our hardest lessons become our greatest gifts. And so I think that's also speaks to Saturn in our chart, which I think is such a key piece when we're looking at this through the lens of medical astrology, because Saturn represents bones,
Mm,
um, and constriction and things that like dry out and harden. And so fascinating for you too, like that this was happening. I'm going to pull up the actual time. So you had Pluto going through your second house in the whole
mm,
signs house system. It was conjunct your natal Neptune. That was your Pluto Neptune
yeah.
activation.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
That's in itself like a really big catalyst, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. And the way you just described it is literally how the ENT described it to me. She was like the bones basically fuse together. They stop like vibrating, in the ear.
Right.
Yeah.
And also an interesting piece here too, because Uranus was moving through your fifth house of children. Okay. And it was also squaring your moon,
Mm.
or about to square your moon. I mean, I'm looking at June of 2015. Do you remember? Do you have a specific time?
Yeah, no, that would have been perfect. That was literally like 2 months before my son was born. Yeah, so that's what I said, like 6, 7 months. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Like how literal is this? And my son is a Capricorn rising. So he's like super like Saturn. Like Saturn is like very present in my chart, and he's literally Saturn ruled.
wow. And so with the that square to the moon, this can often indicate some type of nervous system overwhelm. Um,
Mm.
Uranus always destabilizes things, or even sudden changes in the body, because the moon in medical astrology does speak to the body. So it's like interesting that the changes that were happening in your body at that time facilitated like kind of this greater nervous system, maybe even reset of how am I going to engage with my environment. Did you happen to grow up in a chaotic environment, like as a child? Was it your nervous system
No,
in any way?
no, not really. It wasn't like very chaotic, but I was the only child. I was very much like left to myself and just kind of like have to figure everything out on my own. Just like no space for my emotions. We didn't talk about anything. We just like sweep them under the rug until enough time has passed that it's no longer awkward. So I feel like I repressed a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm a Capricorn moon also, so I'm like we like to put things in a box for later, for never. So I feel like a lot of like my box is just fucking overflowing. So that from like that nervous system perspective. Yeah.
I mean, like what I'm guessing is that the containment for what you had been holding kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
ruptured at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The box was like, girl, you've been stuffing things here for like 20 years. Can't hold anymore.
Exactly. Well, especially if you're going to become, you are essentially, when you're becoming a mother, is that you're a vessel, right? You're a container.
Mm.
Space.
Mm.
The wound space, in my perspective, is very Saturnian because even though there is flexibility and growth, anyway, dura mater, right? Like the dura mater of the system, it's like that is Saturn. That's what Saturn rules in the body. So anyway, it makes a lot of sense that this was kind of the initiation that you experienced in motherhood to kind of put you in that like reframe and the restructuring of your internal system. What is interesting too is that in the whole signs house system, second house is the jaw and like kind of everything in this region. And I mean, if you think about it, it's like it's vagus nerve stuff too.
Mm.
So was that
Mhm.
ever a part of your experience in terms of what was waking up for you at this time, or like stuff that you were becoming aware of in terms of regulation or nervous system awareness or protecting or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, that's it. And when I was doing therapy, that's what I realized that basically completely dysregulated and just like trigger happy like all the time, from all of my own inner child and mother wounds. And like we were saying before, like motherhood really just shine a like freaking light on that, right? Like spotlight. So yeah, it just felt a very dysregulating time period for sure. And that was what really surprised me. Then when my daughter was born and it kind of happened again and it was more like amplified. So with my son, it kind of felt more like just anxious, like I would say like anxiety, you know? And I think because that's it, my nervous system was just picking up on so much. My gifts were coming online. Like I was saying, I'm literally picking up everybody's emotions, not understanding. My like mother's intuition is freaking like up through the roof. But again, I don't really know yet. So I'm feeling very anxious, which I said when I had my spiritual awakening, then I realized I was like, shit, all along, I wasn't anxious. It was like what I would describe as anxious would be like, we're leaving, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, hold on, like we don't have this thing and that, and I need to get this, you know? And so those are the types of things where I would describe as like anxious and wanting to like control and kind of over prepare. But then when I started really paying attention and following those little nudges, like literally 9 times out of 10, I needed like the random thing that I was like, wait, we don't have this, and I gotta go back in and get it, you know? Like, so it was really interesting. It was like I was describing it as anxiety because I just didn't really know any better. But all along, it was just like, yeah, that intuitive scanning and picking up on things, you know? So then when I finally started paying attention, I was like, oh my goodness. And I remember I tell my clients this all the time when they start having that activation of their gifts and all. I'm like, I really need you to stop thinking that you're anxious and start listening and follow those little nudges, and you'll start seeing. Like one of the stories that I love telling, like this one time we were going to the beach and I get this random thought to bring homeopathy. Like I have a little kit with me, you know, like my little travel kit. And I remember like my husband being like, what do you mean? Like, where are you going with your homeopathy kit? Like, you know, like paranoid much? And I was like, I don't know, I just need to bring it. And so we were with my best friend and she's allergic to shellfish. And we were all at the restaurant eating. It was a restaurant on the beach, and her husband had like a little lobster, whatever thing. And as he was taking it, it like splashed into her eye. Cause you know how like it's just like juicy. So it splashes into her eye. She's like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh wait, I have homeopathy. So I like give it to her, you know? So it's like I cannot like I have hundreds of these examples now of things that I would be like anxious and like something's gonna go bad at the beach. And it's like, no, it was just like a little intuitive hit, like just bring the freaking kit, you know? So yeah, that was kind of like how it really felt with my son of that like anxiousness. But then yeah, with my daughter, then it was just like even more and really activating that maternal wounding. That it was the rage that I was like not surprised, like I was not prepared for at all. Like postpartum rage was just like never heard of it.
Yeah, nobody talks about that. That is like a really interesting.
Mm.
So, so Saturn was also trying your son when you were pregnant with your son. And that's an interesting piece of it too, just because, again, we're talking about Saturn and the bones and whatnot. And in some sense, it seems like, yeah, like the way that you're framing it and the way that you're looking at it wasn't so much like, oh my God, this is terrible. It was like, oh, this is something that's like supporting me in becoming my true self, like the self that's always been there that maybe has been buried underneath, just survival strategies that are ready to be reframed and restructured. So that's really interesting too. So when your daughter was born, you said there was like a further activation.
Well, it's just like basically everything that I had been gaslighting myself for like 2 years about was just like, okay, no, like I'm done. Like this is real. This is a thing. And then it was like there was no more doubt. So I guess in that way it was like an excel because it was like I finally like I accepted it. Like I didn't think that that's it. I was crazy, that I was making things up, da da da, right? Like I wasn't anxious, like I said. I was like, no, no, I'm psychic AF, I'm not anxious. So yeah, it was like a very different acceptance piece, but also with a lot of just grief and things. Basically, the short end of it was like I said, like my son was vaccine injured, but I let everybody just kind of like gaslight me into it and thinking about it. And I worked in the industry. And then my daughter, so she had crazy acid reflux, which like really contributed to my postpartum depression because she would scream and cry for like 4 hours every night. It was horrible. And I did all the things and, stop eating this or whatever. And then I finally stopped breastfeeding, whatever. And we got it like fixed with this like crazy ass $100 bottle formula, and it went away for 2 months. And then she got her 12-month shots and it came right back. And that was the moment that I was like, no, like no, because it had gone away and then it came back and nothing else had changed. And like I said, the seeds had been planted, but it was a first time mom. I just didn't really trust myself as much, so I was literally gaslighting myself. And then when that happened, I was like, no, 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 there's no more doubts in my mind. And then, like I said, that my Saturn return followed, and it was just like, ah, you're okay.
Wow. So this was almost like setting the stage. Like everything that was happening with
Mhm.
your son was setting the stage for the transformation that you were supposed to go through. That's an
Exactly.
interesting piece too to think about Saturn trine the sun, because I think when people think about harmonious transits, they think, oh, it's just going to be like all good or something, you know? And that's not always how it is. It's dynamic, but it's also transformative, you know, and it can really bring about change too. I think that there's a like people misunderstand that sometimes. Not saying that it was
Mm.
like all bad for you, but that there was something that needed to kind of come to the surface and be unearthed
Mm.
in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and also what's interesting, karmically with like my family, which again, when we talk, it's like a big part of what I do, and that's what I do with like family readings. I look at children with their parents, like everybody together. And when I look at our family, my son is definitely contracted, and like his chart is very much to clear and help his father line, whereas my daughter is very much karmically contracted and coded to clear our maternal line. So it just kind of like, yeah, it just all flows together, and it just makes sense why her experience has just been way more challenging. And my son was just like, yeah, the seeds, so he's really here, yeah, for his dad line, and my daughter for my line. Good
Right.
times.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. I love doing family astrology because it's so fascinating to see the patterns and the echoes through the lineage. Like, oh, this
Mhm.
person's working out this thing. And then this person's like really struggling with working out this thing. But this person, wow, by the time we got to this generation, there's like a little bit more ease and flow. Like, thank God, like this gets resolved here, you know? So it's really
Mhm.
fascinating to see that. Um, it really shows like there's no accidents. You know, this is all part of a greater plan.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you want, I'm super curious, like a little side tangent of like how people, when people ask you about like free will, with astrology, because I think it's all so fascinating. And I like to say, for me, like my point of view is that yes, we have free will, but in a way, like to a certain degree, because it's like your soul kind of signed up for a bigger thing, right? It had a plan, and it wasn't just gonna like pass off the reins to this human, because it's like we got shit to do. Um, so I like to say that like the overall picture is kind of faded, but then the free will is like the path that you get to choose. Like, are you going to choose the path of least resistance, following, your higher self, your fuck yes energy, and it's like more maybe harmony, or are you going to be like, no, and be stubborn and go around in circles and not want to integrate the lessons and kind of all the detours, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a choose your own adventure kind of situation
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
have this map to kind of guide you through life of like how do I want to work with this stuff. And I think the more awareness we have, and this is where astrology can become really supportive in our evolutionary path, is just like the more we understand about ourselves, the more self-agency and choice we have in how we respond. So it's not like we can control it, but we can show up. We have some element of choice and like, okay, I see what's going on. Do I repeat the pattern that I know has a certain type of outcome, or do I choose something different and see how this turns out and see what I'm made of? And kind of what you're saying, like align with that FES and that, like I got this, like the higher self that knows. It's like actually more of a quiet knowing, don't you think? Like the inner
Yeah,
knowing is like actually more quiet than um kind of the mind, which is like just chaotic and like all over the
totally.
place and stuff. So I think that this time in our collective experience is really teaching us how to align with that quiet knowing, that inner gnosis of what it feels like to move in flow with life, but also like and to trust ourselves in that process, but also to kind of expand into the possibility that it can actually be pretty easy or like fluid and we make it harder through the resistance.
Yeah, totally. I like to do this one analogy that I say to people, I'm like, the astrology is going to astrology, whether you believe it or not, whether you read it or not. I was like, so I'm like, do you want to be, let's say your life is a ship, and like, do you want to be down on deck, being thrown around in the storm, freaking side to side, or do you want to be the captain at the helm of the boat? The boat is still in the storm, but do you want to be down on deck, flopped around, or do you want to be like holding the helm, you know?
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. I love that. That's perfect because yeah, exactly it. We do have choice on some level. It's a both and, I don't think it has to be either or, um, but yeah, anything else you want to speak to or name about like this experience of the hearing loss and Oh, well, something I wanted to just acknowledge is that the right ear in medical astrology is it's ruled by the sun and Mars and Aries
Mm.
rules the head anyway. So I thought that was like kind of an interesting component too, with just with what Saturn was doing to your Aries sun at that time.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Well, with that, then so I was looking at, you said you had mentioned early September. So then Mars was smack opposite your moon.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what my time. Oh no, my Time Lord was Saturn that year. So what was your Time Lord that year? You were in a second house year. So Saturn.
No.
Okay. We were both in Saturn ruled years.
I know. I know. I have such a love-hate relationship with Saturn. I'm
Oh,
hoping we're gonna get more to love now that it's like Pluto has like moved out of Capricorn, just like not messing all my shit up.
well, Saturn, yeah, Saturn is, I think, often misunderstood. And, until we really learn over time and gain the wisdom of Saturn and learn how to work with it, I think it is really heavy and intense. And like, this three-dimensional reality, which is what it rules and represents, is like, it's hard. It's hard to live in a human body and to be a spirit
Mm,
confined in a body. But
totally.
I have found over time, especially as someone, because you have a Moon Saturn conjunction, I have the square. We are Saturnian in that way, where we have a very personal relationship with that energy and that archetype. So, yeah, I find that we get better at that over time.
I know, that's what I keep telling myself. I was like, okay, Saturn is like maturity, reward you over time. I'm gonna be 36, like I'm getting over that, like, you know.
Getting over the hump.
I'm not, not a
Yep.
little younger, young thin anymore, you know. I was like, okay, this is great.
Totally. So, well, this has been so awesome to connect with you and just share in this experience because obviously it helps me feel less alone in just the journey and to hear your process too of like how you can take something and like take a negative experience, let's say, and use it to your benefit, where it's like, thank you, body, for doing this for me so that my nervous system doesn't have to be overwhelmed. And maybe where as a child you didn't have that level of under like containment, right? And you were just absorbing and picking up on things in your environment, like now you have skills and gifts and tools that help you to manage it better.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, thank you so much. This is really, really fun. And it's just like, I just love how we're like, oh, there it is again. Oh, yeah, there, yeah. Like again, it was like, it's just so, so literal. And I think it's just such a testament to like, yeah, these things really are fated and like predetermined. And that's how I see it. Like your soul had a plan and they mapped it all out. And they're not like leaving us to like raw dog it. Like they literally gave us the plan, you know? But,
Point, like this is I find so helpful in the work that you do and the work that I do of supporting parents and understanding their children and what their children are going to experience in this lifetime so that we can truly be informed guides. So we're not just raw dogging it or like, just like how do I, everybody says that, right? Like I wish I had a manual for my kids
I
and
know.
that you do. And honestly, I think my relationship with astrology, I don't know if this is true for you too, but I started studying astrology well before I had kids. But once I had kids, I was like, thank God I know this. So because if I didn't, I think I would have like made many assumptions about my children and now I have this lens through which I can see them more clearly and understand what they need from me and who they are and how they're perceiving things. Not entirely, of course, because they have their own experience, but to get a sense for that. And it's,
Mm,
to have that information.
yeah. Yeah, totally. I think it's helped me let go of a lot of the pressure that I was putting on myself. To say with all my Capricorn, I tend to be really hard on myself. And one of my biggest takeaways was when I realized both my kids had Aries moons. And so when they were like toddlers, like priests, like into like 4 or 5-ish, and they kind of like that phase where toddler tantrums start like not being so acceptable anymore, you know? And I was just like being really hard on myself, and I was like, I must be doing something terrible. Like they're just so explosive, so many tantrums. Like clearly I'm not teaching them emotional regulation. Like I was like, I suck. And then realized that they had Aries moon, and I was like, oh, okay, no, this explains everything. I was like, I don't suck so much. Not that I like let them just like rage all the time, you know, but I was like, now instead of being like, do you want to talk about your feelings? I'm like, go punch your pillows, go scream and let it out, and then we'll talk about your feelings. You know?
Yeah, exactly. My daughter has a Scorpio moon, and it's just funny side story here of like when I was pregnant with her, I was tracking the astrology, like
Mm.
I was like, oh well, it's going through it, every 2.5 days, the moon changes signs, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have a Scorpio moon child, like yeah, and so I was just skip over those days where because I just in my mind thought, no, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to have a child that has a Scorpio moon. Because of everything I read about it, like, and this
Yeah.
relationship with the mother, that's like horrible and intense. And it has been completely the opposite. It has totally transformed my understanding of Scorpio energy and
Mm.
how it can be embodied. Obviously, there's a spectrum of expression for all these signs and planets. So, it's been such a beautiful gift to just be a mom to a Scorpio moon and to have a different experience.
Yeah. I love that so much. Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
cool.
I wonder if that's like a generational change actually now. I'm like, I'm gonna keep an eye on that because I feel like our generation is probably very much of that like negative Scorpio moon. But then if you that's it, have our generation do the work, and then that's it. The with you and your daughter, that next generation could be a very different iteration of Scorpio moon, you know? I feel like that's like
Well,
there's like a generational thing.
yeah, I'm Uranus in Scorpio, you're Pluto in Scorpio. So we've like, like my generation like started to wake up to stuff that had
Mm,
been under the surface, and then your generation like came and transformed it in a bigger
mhm.
way. So
Yeah.
I that's really true. That makes a lot of sense of how we can totally change how these things are manifesting in real time.
Hmm. Yeah. I love it.
Well, thanks so much, Annie. I would love to have you back on another time. And I will include all of Annie's contact information here if you feel inspired to reach out to her for a reading or an experience. I know you have like a couple of different offerings going right now. Is there anything that's coming that's like new in 2026 for you?
Yeah, there is. Thank you for that. So I'm going to be focusing my one-on-one mentorship on that threshold of motherhood and really working with women who are entrepreneurs and who have business, and now have a baby coming in and changing all that and really like supporting them in that identity shift, that portal so that they can keep doing both and really balance whatever that'll look like. But do all the things. Like you want to have it all. Yeah, so I'm really excited for that evolution and really supporting moms in that identity shift because I think, it's clear from our conversation, it's huge, right? So I'm like, I can't just imagine the power of having, yeah, astrology guidance and spiritual mentorship and really just even like how the gifts are activated and all right. So I'm excited for that.
Cool, great. Well, that sounds amazing. And so in alignment with this next year, which is this huge identity reformation for everyone, but
Exactly. Yeah.
specifically for moms, right? Like your
Hmm.
son is in the fifth house. That makes a lot of sense. So that's beautiful. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see how this unfolds for you and for everybody. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.